there was a need to create a bridge of understanding and communication between the nations in the city of Calgary in such a way that it would help community, that would help the people in cultural ways that made sense to them. Because before I went over there, there's a lot of really great programs, Boys and Girls Club, different programs, but they didn't have an Indigenous focus, that were doing it with an Indigenous lens. So that whatever is built, whatever services are being provided, wherever people live, it has an Indigenous underpinning to it. Policies can guide us. If they don't guide us correctly, we need to change them. Planting a garden, I like to till the soil and create a garden so that things can grow. Instead of indigenizing, create parallel. Language has been lost, culture has been lost, so we're rebuilding, and it's a wonderful thing to see. Start to understand how they can operationalize worldviews. So we talk about being like the forgotten people, the like invisible people, like people didn't know, how can I not be Métis? Like this doesn't make sense to me. So I believe identity is crucial. Identity is a really interesting thing because, like I said, my grandma had a horrible life, horrible life, because it strengthens you, right? You actually know where you sit in the world. You know what you believe. You know why you believe it. But again, I think if you don't know who you are, if you don't have that strong sense of identity, you won't have the strength to do that. So I think if you're part of things, you see what's happening, you start to understand what should be that strength to guide you as your basic, like as a person in the world, right? That's true for everything. Like things will take time to change, but you need people to just sort of kick in a door, but sort of open some doors and like Dr. Reg Croce says, create those aha moments where people are like, oh, my colonial name or my income tax name is Sharon Goulet. But the name I've been given two names, and the name that I was given by Elder Patrick Daigneault is Yellow Thunderbird Woman.
So we're excited to talk to Sharon Goulet today, who is a Red River Métis and a citizen of the Otipemisiwak Métis government within Alberta. Sharon was born in the Treaty 1 territory, or Winnipeg, and is related to the Millers, settlers, Spences, and Irwins who lived in the area during the time of Louis Riel. At a young age, Sharon moved to Montreal with her family. While she was in the area, she completed a bachelor's degree in cultural anthropology at McGill University, and she later moved to Treaty 7 territory to complete a bachelor's and master's degree in social work, focusing on Indigenous leadership, policy, and community development.
Sharon has worked in Otaskwenni, or the city of Calgary, for over 30 years in a variety of positions. Her work has involved funding, social planning, community development, research, and advocacy on issues that concern the Indigenous urban communities. So on that note, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I'll just add that I'm an alumni from University of Calgary.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. And coming in, everything's pretty much the same. So I knew exactly where you guys were, and the muffins were the same downstairs. So it's nice to be back.
Did you go to Bake Chef?
I went to the coffee place.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. Okay.
They have the fruit and the little nuts and yeah.
Yeah, well, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's gloomy outside, but we're going to have a great conversation.
Yeah.
I guess the first question that we do have for you is, what were some of your job roles at the City of Calgary? If you could kind of describe what your responsibilities were, which ones are your favorite, which ones you reflect on the most?
I started actually at the City of Calgary with, we have a committee called the Calgary Aboriginal Urban Affairs Committee, and they're a committee that was actually developed by former Premier Ralph Klein and the Chiefs of Treaty 7, who recognized that there was a need to create a bridge of understanding and communication between the nations in the City of Calgary. So CAWAC is the acronym. They've been around for, longer than me. So I've been at the city 31 years in October, probably close to 50 years. Like it's been there quite a long time. So I started there, funny story, on a 6-month mat leave, and I never left. And so I was always able to get myself into positions, or if someone found value in my what I could bring. So I went from CAWAC. I worked in Indigenous community development with a bunch of really lovely ladies. Again, trying to do whatever I could to help with kind of larger social issues. We have other community workers and neighborhood workers that work with the residents, but I find that the work in community is more with larger social issues, homelessness, affordable housing, those kind of things. So that's the work that I did. for, oh my goodness, probably 6 or 7 years. And then after that, there was an opportunity to work in funding. I really liked funding. I really liked doing that role. And so at the time when I was asked to go over and work with that group of people, so FCSS is a federal funding pot of money that comes from the province, and it comes to the city, and we cost share money that is similar to United Way that we can then send out to community agencies to do the good work that they do. And so I came over when it was recognized there was a need for an Indigenous funding pot of money or a directional document, some sort of way to understand the best way to spend the money with community agencies. So I really, really enjoyed developing that. I enjoyed was not necessarily giving money out, like I enjoyed doing that, but I enjoyed trying to figure out a way. I mean, I'm a social worker, right? So trying to figure out a way to work at a bigger level to do a couple things, to make sure that the money was spent, if it was going to go to an Indigenous serving agency or an Indigenous agency, that it was done in such a way that it would help community, that would help the people in cultural ways that made sense to them. Because before I went over there, there's a lot of really great programs, Boys and Girls Club, different programs, but they didn't have an Indigenous focus. And so one of the things that I did with some of those agencies, as well as elders and just community people, is to try to understand what the best use of that money was. And it was to look at core issues. So we had never before looked at, we would fund peripherally. So we would fund, somebody had, I don't know, whatever it was bringing them to that agency, but we never looked at really what was going on. So we really refocused to look at residential schools, intergenerational trauma, loss of identity, and a lack of social inclusion. And so that was the first time we actually got to the meat of what was really happening. I think it was at the beginning. And of course, we all talk now about residential schools, the TRC, calls to action. But that was quite far ahead of its time. And I really credit the community say, we're doing all this stuff off the side of our desk. You guys are paying for it. We appreciate it, but we're not really addressing the real issues that people are bringing. So I enjoyed doing that, and I enjoyed helping agencies to do the best work they could. Like, I really liked that role. After that, I went over to the Indigenous Relations Office for a bit of time, not very long, and then I got scooped by the affordable housing team, because they, again, had, they have a directional document, and they had 2 sentences in there saying something to the effect of, we'd like to work with Indigenous communities and leadership. And we blew it into the Indigenous Affordable Housing Plan that went to council seems like a couple summers ago, to again make sure that if we're working in the affordable housing spectrum, that we're doing it with an Indigenous lens. So that whatever is built, whatever services are being provided, wherever people live, it has an Indigenous underpinning to it. Right. So I like doing that kind of work. And I was actually a guest lecturer a couple weeks ago in the social work faculty, and it was around policy. I like doing policy work because I think that a friend of mine once said, policies can guide us. If they don't guide us correctly, we need to change them. So I've always tried to find that little window or just a little crack in the door, so that we can change policies. We can change things at that bigger level, so that the people doing the work on the ground, like I'm the worst clinical social worker you'll ever find. It's not my thing, which is ironic because my daughter's going into psychology next year at the university. She's very excited. But I like to create, it's like planting a garden. I like to till the soil and create a garden so that things can grow, right? So I think policy can do that. I think working with funding, working with community, and, creating a dedicated space where people can, take over that work and build it out. That's the kind of work that I've enjoyed. So I did a bit of work with affordable housing folks. And now I'm back in the Indigenous Relations Office at the city and doing a lot of work around, I call it like the basement renovations. So we're trying to, we've done a lot of TRC work since probably 2019. It seems like we're on the pandemic. Now we're in a place where we're trying to figure out our next steps, the next things that make sense for us to do. And then I'll probably retire because I've been there a long time. I've been there almost 31 years. So, but again, it's all of that knowing a lot about everything, but not enough to do, and then just seeing where there's a lot of times it's good people that open up those cracks. It's cracks in policy. It's cracks in the TRC was a massive crack where we could kind of get in, right? And you just take advantage of those and see what you can do to help communities. So anything that I can do to help strengthen or build out the community in Calgary, Indigenous community in Calgary, that's what I enjoy doing.
Right. This is all really great work that you're doing, and it's really an honor to be here to listen to all of the work that you've been doing and that's going to be happening. Just for our listeners here, could you explain what the TRC is and does?
Yeah, so I'll go back a little bit. So, we're all here, and that's great. And then I was actually living in Montreal when the Oka crisis happened. So I saw it all happen. It was so bizarre. I saw the helicopters and the effigies burning on the bridge. So to me, the Oka crisis is what prompted the RCAP, Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples report, which if you want to have a really easy read, it's 6,000 pages. So the commissioners went across Canada and they actually spoke to Indigenous communities across Canada, and they developed this massive report. And I always say that the RCAP report was the grandfather of the TRC report, because it was so huge that it's still very valuable, but it didn't pick up speed. And so the TRC or the RCAP report happened, and then the TRC happened, and I think it was again in response to a lack of action, right? So a number of commissioners, including the Honorable Murray Sinclair, he just passed actually. They were the architects of what we now know as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which is a series of recommended actions for all levels of government, all levels of society, with some specific direction for, for example, the provincial government when it comes to child welfare. So it's articulated in such a way that people can see where they can do the work. And so the city took a look at the report, and again, within the confines of the Municipal Government Act, which is what drives our work, keeps us within our legislative spaces. We were able to see what the city could do. And so that's what guides the work of the city overall. It guides the work of the Indigenous Relations Office specifically. It was endorsed by City Council. So, again, it gives us a directional idea of what we could actually do to make changes.
Well, that's really good to hear that the TRC is being implemented at the policy level. And then, like you said, the people on ground are also able to kind of capture some of those elements. So that's really great.
I think there's stuff for all of us to do.
Oh, yeah. No,
and I think there's also stuff, we can do with intention that's not necessarily one of the calls. Like there's a lot of things that can happen.
Internally,
Well, just in life. I mean, I think even the university, I know you have an Indigenous strategy. All of those things are examples of similar ways of course, getting into the work and making change.
And I know you mentioned using like an Indigenous lens. So for the organizations that you've worked with, what does that look like? Does that mean including more Indigenous partners, or? It's
more difficult than people think. And I think that what I've learned from the elders that I've worked with, and I can only speak from a Métis perspective, but I'll sort of generalize, is I always joke and say, people talk about indigenizing, this radio station. And I'll say, well, it's like saying I'm going to feminize my husband, right? Like it's not that easy, right? It's not. And I think a lot of people at the beginning thought, this will be easy. We'll do it in a year, right? I'm just going to put Indigenous in front of everything. But it doesn't really work that way, because the best work that I've done and the direction I've been given is to create an elder Reg Croce, who's one of the leads of the university's Indigenous strategy, and is an absolutely the most brilliant man I've ever met in my whole life. If you get to hear him speak, he's absolutely amazing. So what he talks about is, we don't want to indigenize anything because we don't want to ruin what you have here. Like, we're not coming in to dismantle this operations you have here, but we can create a parallel. Something that because that's really what the treaties were based on, is the Two Row Wampum, or that idea that both canoes could, go freely down, right, side by side, and somehow we got mixed and melded together. And so you'll often hear people talk about indigenization or blending. And in what he would say is when you start to blend, somebody loses. Because there'll always be something that sort of comes up at the top. And so a lot of Western institutions, they have a lot of infrastructure, they have funding, like they've been around for a while, right? And so we always lose when we blend. So his recommendation is to parallel. And you'll hear him talk about ethical space and parallel process. So instead of indigenizing, create parallel. And so then, and I talk about DNA, right? So if you want to build a horse, you can't start with cat DNA, you have to, right? And so to me, the creation of Indigenous lenses or creation of Indigenous approaches needs to recognize the original DNA of how you start. So you can't do that if you indigenize something, because you still have you're still working with what you started with. Yeah. So a lot of that work is unpacking everything, understanding where there's bias, understanding where there's, inherent or probably in a lot of cases, like normalized racism is what I call it, right? Where people say, well, this is how we normally do things. And you're like, well, normal for who? Right? Like that's the question is normal practice based on what worldview? And so if we create a parallel where we normalize the original worldview and then build out from there, it's amazing what you end up seeing. Yeah. You see things that look different. The intention is the same, but they're just done in different ways. Done with oral practice, with ceremony, with language, with elders. Things that I remember when I first started my funding role, I would say to the agencies, well, put in your budget what you need. Well, I'm like, put in elder, and it was quite a shock because we had never done that before. But if you build up parallel, you need like a parallel resources. Yeah. You'll need a venue, like where are you going to host this? You need staff, you need people that will do this, you need all those things. And so I think the first step is to build that parallel. The second one is to realize it's going to take time to build out, like if you imagine. So I think sometimes people think, we have equitable, like we can just go, right? But we can't. Language has been lost, culture has been lost. So we're rebuilding, and it's a wonderful thing to see. But it'll take time. Yeah. Right? And it's taking a lot of unpacking of stuff in a very humble way, right? Not trying to fight it or stop it, and because a lot of the work, I always say it's about power and resources, right? And so if you don't give us some power and resources, we can't we can't do it. It's difficult, but so I think through those parallels, that's when you start to see worldviews come out, and you start to see people start to understand how they can operationalize worldviews.
I think it's really cool when you brought up that, well, the city of Calgary really took a hard look at the TRC, and then they were trying to create initiatives out of there, look at specifics. I think it's really cool that they also looked at community voice as a really essential thing in creating anything that they're doing, because I feel people often forget, like that's the first step, is that if you're working with community, you should understand who your community is, what they want, what their needs are, how they operate, essentially thinking about language, like you were saying, to work in parallel. And I feel like a lot of people forget the most basic steps. So I'm very happy that the city of Calgary operated that way. Do you think a lot of other cities also did the same thing that the city of Calgary did?
I can tell you exactly. So a couple years ago, I was asked to do some work. And so I actually reached out. We have a network across Canada of other Indigenous relations offices or people working in the area. And I had some folks graciously agree to interview with me. And a lot of them are, and it's like you said, there's no cookie cutter way to do it. You have to base it on the environment that you're, and the people that are in this environment. Who best knows what to do than the people themselves, right? Because we think about this all the time. People always say, there's another Indigenous academic I have a lot of respect for, and he talks about Indigenous people are born into politics, and we are. And so we know what hasn't worked. We've thought about what can work. And I find a lot of so I talked to City of Vancouver, City of Edmonton, Muskoka, Toronto, a couple more. And in their own ways, they are all sort of addressing things. They're doing the same thing. They're looking at where they might work with particular calls to action and or community requests. Because like I said, I think there's this before the TRC, before our CAP, some of the ladies that I started with, we did it through just sheer force of will to make some of these changes as best we could in environments where we saw some openings, right? So I think you can still do the best work you can still work with community and make changes. The TRC just gives some direction, right? But yeah, no, City of Edmonton has been doing a lot of work. City of Vancouver, they actually also, I believe they adopted UNDRIP. And I think that's the first municipality that actually adopted UNDRIP, which is the United Nations Declaration for Indigenous People. So everybody's doing things based on their own local politics, what the community are asking for. But yeah, making changes, right? I think that at all levels of government, the federal government has a role, the provincial government has a role, the city has, the municipality has a role, and the nations are interested, right? They're interested in working with us in a way we've never done before. So I think that's pretty cool as well.
Yeah, I feel like it also takes a long time to build that trust as well.
Yeah.
For community to open up and say, hey, like, let's talk about this. This is what I want. And I feel like that trust had been lost for a really long time. So I'm glad that that trust is like building. And I think, honestly, I always think that working in collaboration is key. You learn from each other. And I love that you kind of have a coalition of all the municipalities and they're all learning from each other, because you can't work in silos, especially when you're working on a very big, heavy topic that has a lot of moving parts on it. You can't work in a silo. So that's really amazing to hear.
Yeah, we share, because we're all starting to see the same things come up. Like, do you guys buy smudge? Like, how do you, like, just things that, again, if you think about building a parallel infrastructure, how do you deal with this human resource issue, or like whatever, right? So we do share a lot of best practice that we're developing, like, on the ground, so that we don't have to duplicate, or we can use each other's work in a better way. So yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So we'll shift a little bit into our topics. I know when we first met online on Zoom, we kind of had a conversation about how you reconnected with your your Métis identity. How was that for you?
It was interesting, and I think what a lot of people don't realize is, there's a couple things, because we often talk about residential schools and we talk about treaties and whatnot. But for Métis people, number one, a lot of Métis kids went to residential schools. So that's not a story that's well known. But I think the other thing that people don't realize is, because of stuff that happened in, like, after Riel was hung, a lot of us went underground. So we talk about being like the forgotten people, the like invisible people, like people didn't know, because life was so hard for a lot of, like, my grandmother and her grandmother, that people just, it was almost easier to pass. So we talk about passing, right? And so for me, I came from a family, like, there's a lot of Métis families that have very strong ties. They were part of rebellions. In my case, my family decided to pass. They're like, it's just, we don't want to be, persecuted, the racism, it was just too much, right? So in my case, my grandparents, or my grandmothers and their grandmothers, they decided to pass. It was just easier. Now, that's not to say they didn't have a crappy life, because I know my grandmother's story is quite bad. But in any event, so I always knew, and I was like, I'm from Winnipeg, and I know, I know these people in Winnipeg. I'm like, how can I not be Métis? Like, this doesn't make sense to me. So I actually, my mother never talked about it, but my dad did. And he told me in the basement, like in this little weird, like in our little room with like a little light, right? It's like I was being interrogated, but it's like, and by the way, like, we're Métis, right? And so I sort of found out that way. And again, because of this passing thing, we had no information, like nobody wanted to talk about it. And so I actually went back to Winnipeg, because I was born in Winnipeg, but I only was there till I was 5. And I went back there and I did a whole bunch of research. So I went to grave sites, I went to, churches, I went to places in Winnipeg. I did a whole bunch. There was a fellow by the name of Jeff Burtonshaw, who's since passed away. He used to work at the Glenbow, and he was non-Indigenous, he wasn't Métis, but he made it his life work to help create that reconnection for Métis people. So he was always sitting there in the Glenbow with tons of books. I went to his house one time, and you could be like buried alive in all of these books of genealogy and whatnot that he had. And so he helped me find things that I wouldn't have found otherwise, in terms of like script records and different relatives that I found. And so I was able to create like a picture of the past and start to understand. It was really cool. I started to think about when people were born and where they would have sat in terms of history. So like I said, Riel was hung in 1885. So I'm like, oh, my grandmother's mother, like she would have been there at that time, right? In Winnipeg, would have suffered through a lot of the extermination of Métis people, right? Like we were suffered lots of racism. We're living on road allowance. Like there was a lot, like we went from valued partners to being sort of outlaws in our own territory, right? So especially in Manitoba. So I started to think, okay, she would have been there at that time, and this person would have been part of that rebellion or would have faced the effects of the rebellion on her identity and her ability to be public about who she was. So I did a lot of that because I'm a loser. I looked through stuff and put timelines together. But, and then the 30s were really bad. And the 60s is when we started to come out. You see a lot of Métis leadership starting to come out and be really, have a strong voice in terms of bringing people back to who they were. So I was born in the 60s. So I was sort of part of that, but didn't realize because of all of the hiding that had happened, right? So, but yeah, it was just a lot of personal research, and then being the black sheep in the family, letting people know, hey, by the way, right? And so it's a really interesting like identity, and I know we're also going to be talking about mental health, but identity is a really interesting thing because, like I said, my grandma had a horrible life, horrible life, a lot of domestic violence, homelessness, just a really, really bad time. But I believe that a lot of that was due to her lack of identity, being proud of who she was and being able to express who she was. And then also all of the socialization of the people around her, like if everyone around you, society says the Métis are bad, right? You're going to start to absorb and adopt a lot of that. So I think that was her life. But, so I am like, hey, by the way, everybody, look what I found. And for her, she was 83 years old when we got her Métis card in Manitoba through Manitoba Métis Federation. She would show the bus driver. She showed the guy at Tim Hortons. Like it was such a remarkable shift in her, right? That she was so proud of who she was. She's telling everybody, and I like to see that. But it took her till she was 83, right? Living through all of this trauma, all of this stuff that she had to face. So I believe identity is crucial. And I find with the calls to action and people getting involved in reconciliation, there's this strange, there's a strange experience where we kind of academically know this happened to people in different ways. So I'm just talking about my personal experience and my family's experience of colonization. And then they'll say, well, speak your language and aren't you proud and tell us who you are. And you're like, well, but that was all that's what Canada tried to remove, right? Is our identity, our practices, our sense of who we are. I believe there's 100 Michif speakers in the entire world, right? So it's like, well, you can't expect like that to happen immediately. But on a personal level, like I said with my grandma, I saw that change in her so dramatic with who she is, right? My mom got her card, but her sister, she's still like, I'm not. Like I will not acknowledge it. Like I just like mentally can't acknowledge that I'm Métis, right? My sister, her sister, she's on this side, right? And I think you see that with a lot of people who have to have that safe space and that sort of desire to start to talk about who they really are, right? But I've only seen benefit come from it because it strengthens you, right? You actually know where you sit in the world. You know what you believe. You know why you believe it, and you start to see stuff that you've just done naturally, and you're like, wow,
makes sense. Yeah.
Now I know why I did that. Like, and it aligns with people in the community. There is, like I said, there's an academic, Indigenous academic. I have a lot of respect for. His name's Dr. Taggy Alfred, and he talks about that, like whether you're Métis or Mohawk or whatever you are, you cannot be Indigenous alone. You're Indigenous in a community, in a sense of community. And so when that community is removed from you through your identity being challenged, right? But then when you get back in the community, you're like, that's why now I understand why I did those things, but it was not explicitly expressed to me, right? So I've benefited from being in the community, being part of Métis Nation in Alberta, within Calgary, lots of great friends. And I think we're just all trying to help each other be proud of who we are. I think that's the most important thing. And it does help with mental health. It does help with a sense of who you are and all those kind of great things that I tried to help the agencies with when I was with the funding, right? So yeah,
identity gives you a sense of purpose, and the sense of purpose really helps mentally. How old were you when you went back to Winnipeg and you looked back into everything?
I hadn't come to university yet, so I was probably in my early 20s.
Okay. Early 20s is like that period where you're finding yourself. I think we're both going through that right now too.
Yeah. I dragged my grandmother around, dragged my mom with me. They're like, why are we going to all these, all of these cemeteries and stuff? And I went and saw Riel's cemetery because it's there, right? There's and different things like different social. In Manitoba, that's sort of where the Red River Métis. Yeah. Right. It's important to us, and so there's lots of symbolism. There's lots of actual sites there, and I just went back and saw them all. I read as much as I could, talked to as many people as I could, and I dragged them around. Because I had never lived there, so it was important for me to have my grandma. She was still able to do that.
And how was that?
This is where we lived, and they didn't know why I was doing it, why it was so important. But I think once everything concluded and I was, able to actually express it, then like I said to my grandmother, I actually went with her in every province is a little bit different in terms of the what you need to bring with you to get your Métis card. So we all have Métis cards. And so I took her there, and she was never so happy. Like, she was just, it was a good thing.
But persistence is key, right? If you want to find something.
Our older people too, they like to tell us what's the stories of what happened to them. And again, I think if you have had an experience of sort of hiding who you are, just hiding, and I think that's not uncommon for people that have gone through trauma, right? You don't really. So she had never spoken about it. She had never spoken about what had happened to her in her life, and sort of the. I don't want to say unconnected, but it's indirect. Experience of her life because of that lack of identity and lack of connection, like I said, she had a pretty traumatic life, right? And so I just let her talk about both that as well as the joy she felt in reconnecting to who she was. So
that's awesome. This reminds me of this book that I've read, April Raintree, and it's about two sisters who went into the foster care system, and one loved being Métis when she was young, and that's all she talked about, advocated for, but the other sister, she was like, no, I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want people to know I'm Métis at all. And later on in the book, you find that the sister who was trying so hard to push it away, she accepted it at the very end. And it's a very this is the first book I've read since maybe grade 9. It has been a long time, but it was a book that took you. It's a short book, easy read, but you go through a lot of emotions. You go through a lot of their journey and what they've gone through, and of that sister who was pushing it away, how she reconnected with it because she learned about her own sister's past. And it kind of reminded me of when you learn about what it means to be whatever you are, what your people are going through. And for her, in the book, it was for her sister was going through. She realized that I kept pushing something away so much, but that's just who I am. Yeah. And then she found a partner who loved her for who she was. And I think that's what made her realize that I shouldn't be pushing who I am away. Mm-hmm. But yeah, thank you for sharing your story. Yeah. How do you express your identity now in your work even?
Well, I'm sitting here with a sash on. I think more than anything, like I said, I've been around for a long time in my work, but also in communities. So I think, yes, I have a Métis card, but there's also that experience of, I always say, and you mentioned this, it's going to take a long time to rebuild trust. It's going to take a long time in different kinds of allyships or working with people in service. I'm talking about non-Indigenous people, coming and saying what can I do for you, right? But regardless of that, I think it's that time spent where people actually do know who you are, and you don't really, like, I don't walk around with my sash on in Métis events because, you know, we know who we are.
Yeah.
We have a good sense of community. So that's one thing. But I think the biggest thing for me, because of how I was kind of, I don't want to say denied. I mean, I understand why that fear of talking about who you were was part of my early childhood. My daughter is full-on Métis. She's known from day one. It's funny. Her little Métis card, it has a picture of her when she was like 2 years old. I mean, eventually we're going to have to get it changed, right? But I was very, very cognizant of the importance of that for her. So her dad is from Horse Lake. He's Cree. And so for her, she identifies, you know, as in both ways, but I would say mostly as a Métis young woman. She's in grade 12, and so she actually started with a little push from her mother, the Truth and Reconciliation Club at her school, first time ever.
Oh, nice.
She's the chair and founder. She has helped other kids understand. So, like for us, if we're sitting in a meeting, I wouldn't say I'm Sharon, I'm a social worker. I'll say I'm Sharon, like just how you introduced me. I'm my people are the Millers, the Setters, the whatever. She does that. She helps people to speak about who they are as part of their introduction, right? Like, so it's creating that parallel of expressing who you are, not just academically. You're in grade 12, right? So she's full in, and I wanted to make sure that she had that opportunity. When she was young, they had to give her a little box. The past president of Métis Nation in Calgary invited her to be the MC for the seniors gathering. So I've tried to involve her as much as I can in the Métis community, but as well in the First Nations community. So we're very grateful to be, we consider ourselves to be sort of adopted into Reg Crowshoe's family. So she talks about him as her grandpa. You know, she's been to ceremony with us. Like, I've included her as much as she can do, but I think she's very strong in her identity in who she is. So if I've done anything at all, I think that's important. I always say she's my biggest project, right? To make sure that I do as much as for her that I wasn't able to have, right? And she has that strong foundation. Whether or not she'll pursue like Indigenous psychology, I don't know. I'm saying her, like, do what you need to do, like whatever makes sense for you. It might be that, it might not be, but I feel like she's prepared to challenge. Because I don't know. I know in social work, like, we have a long history of Indigenous social work, like really challenging the social work profession and building out something a little bit different, right? In terms of new social workers going into the field. I'm not sure where psychology is with that, but maybe she'll challenge. I mean, I don't know. Maybe she'll challenge them and make a difference, right? So, but again, I think if you don't know who you are, if you don't have that strong sense of identity, you won't have the strength to do that. So
that's true.
Of course. It sounds like she gets a lot of her jive from you, so that's great. And
Mother might be, you know.
We'll have to get her on this show in a few years.
In a few years.
Psychology department, you'll find her.
Department. And when you were in University of Calgary doing your bachelor's and your master's, I know that was probably a while ago, but did they have aspects of Indigenous topics in their teachings?
So I say I did Indigenous leadership because I think it was leadership, and I just put Indigenous in front of it because it was critically important to me to, again, challenge that and say, well, this is my life. This is my experience. This is my life. When I did my master's, I was working at the city of Calgary at the same time. So I had the opportunity to bring work that I was doing there into the forum of social work and say, well, you know, this is what's happening in my work. Can we consider this in the faculty, right? And so I think we kind of pushed the agenda a bit. I actually graduated with Dr. Carrie Moore, who's actually working in the faculty right now. I know she just got her doctorate. So her and I were partners in crime. I want to mention her because she's amazing.
She was actually our first guest on this podcast.
Isn't she amazing?
And she is absolutely amazing. I met her at a conference last week as well.
So we just did what we needed to do, said what we needed to say, supported each other. I would say, because we're talking like 30 years ago, things are a little bit more deliberate. But like I said, it doesn't mean that you can't, with spirit and intent and just sheer drive, start to create different conversations. So I think that's really what we did. I know from doing guest lectures, there's a lot more Indigenous social workers or Indigenous people going into social work, so they're able to open more doors. And I think that that's true for everything. Like, things will take time to change, but you need people to just sort of kick in a door, but sort of open some doors and like Dr. Reg Croce says, create those aha moments where people are like, oh, I never thought of that before. I think those are good moments to push through. And and I still see Dr. Carey, and she's doing great work still with the faculty. So
no, we're extremely grateful. I think when I first had this idea for the podcast, I went to Dr. Carey, and she was the guiding elder for the show, and she helped us get our naming ceremony and everything done. So extremely grateful for her work and everything she does.
She's amazing. She's a good clinical social worker.
Shout out to Elder Carey.
Yes.
And just wanted to dial back and ask this question. So you're talking about how there was this disconnect of people struggling with their identity or feeling disconnected from the Métis community and their roots. And I think this is a universal struggle in a way. Like, even myself and Harvey, and I know we've had our moments where we felt very disconnected from our own South Asian communities, but by being involved in more community activities, we're trying to find our identity. So what advice would you give to Métis youth that are struggling to connect with their identity or feeling lost, or
it's very easy, I think, to get us totally subsumed by Western, because it's all around you, and I think that's a struggle, right? I tried. I'm not a good language learner. I tried to. There's an online course to learn Michif. And I tried, and I couldn't do it, because I think, like, in that case, to your point, who am I going to speak Michif to, right? Because everybody's speaking English. Like, it's that that sort of isolation in a bigger, like you're a little fish in a big pond of just Western thinking. So I think it is very difficult to block that out. But I would just say, well, two things. Get involved in community. We're always desperately looking for young people. Maybe we talk like old people, and maybe we're too not fun enough. But, there is at Métis Nation, a good friend of mine, her daughter is actually the youth coordinator at Métis Nation. And so there's youth activities that you can go to. But what I would say, so just get involved and just listen and watch, and learn, right? Because I think we don't necessarily say, okay, you're learning this now, right? Like, it's just like you show up and people do things, which is how I was brought up. This was that I'm like, okay, that's what's happening. Like, you would never sit as people were taking tables out and you would never, right? You just get up and do stuff. So I think there's a lot of learning of what I want to call like non-performative stuff, values, ethics, those important things that underpin a group of people and the identity they share. And I say that because I don't like perform. One thing I don't like is performative stuff, which I think is what a lot of people like, but it doesn't speak to those more important, your basic values, how you understand yourself as being, different and important in a larger society. And what are those things, right? Like, for us, for example, like, we would never speak over elders, like, you never cross, like, you don't do that, but no one's going to tell you that. So I think if you're part of things, you see what's happening, you start to understand what should be that strength to guide you as your basic, like, as a person in the world, right? And it may be different than Western society, but that's okay, and I think, I would just say get involved, be part of the youth program at Métis Nation, or volunteer for things. Like, there always need volunteers during Stampede and different things. And so Métis Nation does put on a lot of community events for members. Just show up, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, and it takes time. Like, I think it takes time for non-Indigenous people to earn our trust, but it also takes us time, if you have been disconnected, to learn, and just, you need to take the time, right? I think a lot of people want that instant gratification.
Yeah.
They want to know it now.
Mm-hmm.
Which I find is in a lot of the work that I do. People want the solution now. And I'm like, well, if we knew this, so we'd have done it a long time ago.
Right.
So a lot of it is, you have to, and maybe do some stuff. I've cleaned a lot of toilets. I've, done stuff, because it's a bit of a test, right? Like, how long are you gonna show up again?
Yeah.
Right. And so there's value in that as well. People want to see your commitment and your dedication to doing that kind of work. So.
Mm-hmm.
I think reconnection is a very active process. And like you said, I feel like we're always looking for immediate gratification. We just want something right away. Like, I feel lost today, but tomorrow I want to find myself. But I think that journey takes a lot of time and patience and learning and reflection. And I think as a young person in my 20s, I still don't know who I am. And I think I'm still struggling to find who I am. But I think knowing that you kind of have to embrace the struggle, I think, is really important. And I think it's actually a driver for me to, sometimes you have those bad days, but you can't let those bad days just take over. You let those bad days drive you to find your purpose. And I think finding identity is just so important. And like you said, again, just figuring out that sense of purpose. It helps you mentally. It helps you reconnect with your roots. It helps you reconnect with your family and find lost ties and build future ties too. And I think doing that in my 20s, I found the podcast and I found out what I was good at. And what I am good at is speaking to people, learning. And so thank you for bringing that up. And I think youth should take this opportunity to explore. And like you said, just get involved in the community in whatever way that looks like, even if that means volunteering at a senior's home and just talking to elders and just having conversations. Little things take time, but they end up in like really big picture stuff.
Yeah. I think, with my daughter, I put her in she did synchronized swimming for years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she was 4 when she started. And I did that to keep her out of trouble.
Yeah.
And I had done that as well. So I knew there was some there's always value in sports and being, interpersonal skills and all those kind of things. But she decided to quit, just to make sure she got into the psychology department. She wanted to make sure her grades were really high. But she found powerlifting she's like, well, let's do something over the summer so I keep my fitness. And I said, well, we can go to the gym, right? So she went there. We started off, and then she was really attracted to the powerlifting side. And she said to me, the swimming was good. Like, I enjoyed it, but it's a lot of hours. But she said, I found my community and I found something, and I find this is something that I will drive myself to do. Right. So sometimes it's not necessarily her Métis identity, like in community, but it's helping her to grow her own sense of her own personality and things that she wants. I mean, because I would go with her, right? And I'd be like, I'm sick. I'm going anyway.
Yeah.
Could you go? Because I think to build out that sense of purpose, like you said, sense of purpose, she's still bringing her Métis identity with her in terms of so Otipemisoak means people who own themselves. I see that in her very much. She's like, I'm doing this. And she's going to provincials in June, and she's driving herself, and she's doing it on her own, which I'm happy to see, right? But again, I think if you don't have that solid sense of identity, it's more difficult, right? And the other interesting thing about her really starting to carve out her sense of who she is, which is a combination, of course, of all things, right? We're just not our cultural identity. She's a power lifter as well, and psychologist. Is she's losing a lot of friends because not losing, but she's starting to separate off from some of her friends because she's like, our values are different. They're more interested in partying. I'm dead. She's like going to challenge the provincial thing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's okay. It
happens.
It happens. And I think when you just developmentally, when you are in that age group, because you guys are a couple years apart, you do start to see that shift, and it becomes that. You find your own tribe, right? You find your own people that you're comfortable with. And some of the other ones, they go away, and that's okay, right? So
right, because when you're trying to find a new identity, you have to shed some of those old layers off. So there's like more room so you could build on that,
Yeah.
embrace new
Yeah.
people, identities,
Yeah.
community spaces.
And the interesting thing with culture is you're never not going to be who you are. So you just, that's a good basis to scaffold everything else on top of, and actually have that drive your whole new perception and how you walk in the world.
I really like that point that you're bringing up, that in a sense, like, community is really building the individual in you. And sometimes people can think, oh, if you're part of a community, you're kind of like blended in, but not really. You're kind of your own person, but within that foundation of having that community. So that's really meaningful.
And the Métis people as well, like, we've always been, because we originated as a mixture of French, European, so French, English, and in our case, Scottish settlers, male, men that came for the fur trade. We're known to be able to pick from all sources, right? Like, we tend to do that. We're like, well, that'll work for me, and I'm going to pick that, and that'll work for me. And so I think also that's a huge benefit, because the world changes.
Yeah.
And so you can, the worldview is flexible enough that you can change and evolve, right? Yeah.
Right. It sounds like you're very
And
adaptable.
become a power lifter also.
Yes.
If you want to be.
Yeah. One question we have is, how has your work in community development, funding, and policy shaped your understanding of the needs of urban Indigenous communities?
I mean, all of that work has been done in like, we talk about co-creation. Like, I think the benefit of and difference for me being in Indigenous roles is that because we're part of community, I always say, like, I can't do my work sitting at the city hall. Like, I can't do that. And so it's always been in conjunction with other agencies doing the work, funding agencies to do the work, talking with people on the ground, being part of those communities, because I can't separate myself from my Métis community in terms of knowing what the issues are. And so I think if you sort of embed yourself, like I said, the personal is political for us. A lot of the issues that I have been able to sit at tables to speak to are things my grandmother faced, right? Domestic violence, homelessness, parenting, how do I want to say this? Like, parenting, but with a trauma lens, having not resolved trauma, right? And the impact on my parents, my mom and my aunties and stuff. So it's kind of intrinsic to who we are. My daughter knows more about social issues than any person who's like 17 should know, but it's just part of your life, right? And you see it in your friends and people suffer through different things, and you support them. So it's almost like you're doing active research, like, all the time, and you can bring it to tables and stuff like that. But I think it's I said this before, who best knows what to do but the people that are in those positions, right? So it can be a struggle, because sometimes we want to tie things up nicely, and everything is like this, and I think the government likes things to be all the same. I think that's just the purpose of government is to create a solid, consistent, right? And then we're like, and by the way, we need an Indigenous housing strategy, or we need something that's different. And so I just, gather all those voices. They're all in my mind as I'm walking the dog. Right. And then, like I said, if there's an opportunity to say something or bring something to a communication or project, I just try to do it. And but it's based on all of that.
Your own experience.
My own experience, but also like all the voices that have informed me, and things that I probably should have forgotten, but I haven't forgotten, and because they're always there. And we are a very strong community in the urban center as well as with the nations. We know each other, so I think it's a little bit more personal in terms of saying, can you tell me about this? Can you, right? It's, but again, that's just through having done a lot of time as well. Yeah.
I want to start off by saying that it takes a lot of courage and resilience to say, hey, I'm Métis, this is what I stand for, this is who I am, and to really embrace your identity among perhaps family that doesn't want to acknowledge it, or other community members that don't want to acknowledge it. So I'm sure, how would you say you protected your mental health through all of this?
I'm an Aries, so I
I like that.
You're
strong-headed.
Yeah, I think you just have to do what's best for you. And I hope I've brought my daughter up that way to say, there's so much pressure from people to be someone else or to do this or to go drink, whatever it is, right? I'm lucky to have come from a family that we kind of embrace being the black sheep, I guess. I mean, like we never had alcohol in our family, never had like nothing, right? Like we've been and so that's helped me to just sort of be like, I don't care. Like, I don't care what you think about me, right? That's not, my job is to be the best me, not to try to make sure you're my friend. Like I've always sort of had that attitude. Yeah, I mean, and I think, that's part of the thing is to be proud of who you are regardless, because I think historically that's been so much of an issue to, and I think the world's opening up now more so to diversity, so it is easier, right? In a way. But yeah, back in the day, after Riel was hung in 1885, it was a rough, 1885 to into the 30s. That was a rough period of time, right? Where I can totally appreciate where people just wanted to survive, But the world's different now, and I think the world will be different for my daughter as well. Like, she has friends from every nation across the globe, right? And I think that what I always noticed with her when she was even in elementary school is if there was any racial bias or things said, people would say, well, that's my friend, that's Anya, like, why are you treating her that way? She's my friend. Like, they didn't care. Like, didn't like, they knew who she was, but that didn't negate the fact that her friend was being treated like she was being treated badly, so her friends would stick up for her, right? So I think that's very different, and I'm glad to see that. And I see a lot of young people, they're just friends with other people, right? Like I think that's a big thing now, where people are just your friends because I like you as a person. Like, I don't, and you're also who you are. And I hope that continues, because things are crazy right now in the world, right? I'm glad to be living in Canada, but I think that's I think that I've seen a big change in that, even just in her generation. So
right. Yeah. And what advice would you give to someone who's also working in the same kind of field, and they feel a lot of pressure, and they feel that some days that they can't work on this because it's so overwhelming on their mental health? What advice would you give them?
Talk to elders, find somebody that's been around a long time. I would just say talk to elders, get some advice. What I like to do is I like to work, and maybe this is my personality, but I like to work on about 15 projects at a time. And so if one becomes overwhelming, I just put that one aside, right. Try to figure out how to deal with it as best I can, not being I don't want to I don't want to ever embarrass it. Like, this is what I've been taught. You don't ever embarrass or humiliate someone for something that maybe the project's not going well because of their perception. So sometimes it's best to park it, right? Reg will say the creator will deal with it. Like, just park it there, move on, go to the gym, go walk your dog, whatever. Especially when it's your whole life that's embedded in what you're doing. It can get very difficult, right? I just have learned to kind of let it go. Let my ego go in terms of what's going on, and just go talk to someone. Just make sure you're not crazy, because maybe you're the problem. I've often been the problem, and get clarity on that, right? So, but it's difficult, and it's like I said before, I think people want immediate results. This is 500 years of stuff we're trying to unpack and fix. It's going to take 500 years more. It's going to be a long process. So don't give up. Just keep going. And when I, again, my daughter, when I did this housing work, she's like, do you know anything about social housing? I said, absolutely not, but I'll figure it out. So I think you have to be brave as well, and just try to do stuff and find people that will help you, because there's always somebody that will help you and sit with you and help you figure things out. Because I think as Indigenous or Métis people, we're expected to know everything about everything and every nation and every issue. And I'm like, I'm a social worker. I'm a Métis social worker. End of story. I don't know about engineering, and right. So I think there's a lot of pressure for us to know everything. And we're all different. There are over 500 different nations across Canada, different language groups, different ways of, we talk about worldviews, many worldviews. So just be who you are and just stick in your niche. Be brave though, but don't get involved in things that you can't, because you will have pressure to do that. So
yeah.
I find that there's this sense that people, categorize all Indigenous peoples into this one category of being Indigenous. But like you said, there's different types of Indigenous peoples, different tribes, different regions. And sometimes I guess you can't speak for every single voice out there. There's
an academic movement just recently where a lot of academics are saying we're going to, and it's because of pan-indigenizing of things we were talking about, but also pretend Indians, like Buffy. It all came out on the CBC. But so a lot of academics are saying because of that happening, we're just going to go and say, I'm Métis, and these are my people, this is where I'm from, and actually give up the word Indigenous to say, if we want to talk pan-Indigenous or have pretend Indians take that word, you can have it. And I'm going to declare who I am as terms of my nation and my history and the people that I come from, because really that's all I can speak to, right? I can talk about my social work experience professionally, but everything I talk about is from a Métis perspective. Like, it's not a pan-Indigenous, right? So I think there's a movement to sort of get rid of that word and just say, I'm from wherever. Like I said, my husband is from Horse Lake. And he's like, I'm from Horse, like, I'm not Indigenous, right? Because those are also colonial words that were made up to categorize us. When I started, the word was Native. Then it was Aboriginal, now it's Indigenous. But these are words that just capture us. And I always say to people, that's like saying you're European. I don't know what that means. Like, it doesn't say anything to me. It doesn't mean anything to me in terms of identity and mental health and connection to who you are. I don't think people would say they're European. They'd say they're Italian, they're from, right? So I think that same sense is permeating people's, again, changing sense of identity and their desire to be very clear about who they are. And I think it's because we've been asked to be all things to everybody, and we can't be. It's not possible. So
yeah, I like that you brought that up. I feel like, well, even when we categorize, let's say like South Asian, for example, it's like a umbrella term. It's very blanket. And so like, what do you mean by South Asian? Like, I'm not South Asian. I'm specifically Punjabi, for example. So like you said, I'm not just like the umbrella term. I'm Métis, I'm from Red River. Like, it's very specific. Like, that's who I am and that's where I'm from. So I think it's a good way to even introduce yourself. Like what you were saying, that's how I introduce myself. And when you introduce yourself, you believe it, you live it. And that's just adds to your, again, sense of purpose. Yeah. Can you believe we've hit the 1 hour mark?
I talk a lot.
No, I can't even believe that we hit that 1 hour mark. It was really fast. It was really fast. Thank you, though. We do have one question for you. Actually, two questions. So one of them is, what gives you hope for the future of Métis and Indigenous communities in reclaiming their identity and culture?
The young people. The young people, like I said, I find they're very strong in who they are. And that will carry everything as far as I'm concerned. Like, that sense of who they are. They're not afraid. And, like I said, there's a bigger space and there's not, I always want to respect, the people before us. Like, they had very small spaces of safety to actually be who they were. So I don't want to negate that. But because everything is, there's a lot changing in the world, I feel like it's this sense of, even, the blanket term Canadian, and it's, everything's changing. The economics of the world are changing. And so I feel like there's, young people where was I the other day? I was at the veterinarian, and there's a lack of vets in the world. And she was saying a lot of young people want to work part-time. I'm like, I don't know how you can pay your rent, but my point is, I think that people's perceptions of how they want to live in this world are different now, very different. And so I think that our young people are very proud of who they are. They know who they are. They know what they want to do. They don't have that fear and a lot of them are both graduating from university with graduate degrees and they're part of their community. So that will, I think, really push. I think also we have a lot of, because of the TRC, our cap in TRC, we have a lot of people who want to step in and help, as well as court cases and things that are now being resolved that should have been resolved years ago, right? I mean, like decades ago. So I think there's a lot of movement legislatively, things opening up. So I think if everybody stays, true to who they are, I think there's a lot of hope, actually.
Yeah, young people are a very powerful, force. Yeah. They are.
They have a lot of energy. I think that's
more energy than me. I'm tired, man.
No, I feel like young people are just nowadays, I find they're just more willing to learn about a lot of things, and they call people out. Like they are very quick to be like, that's not how you operate, blah, blah. And I feel like that recently changed in the last couple of years. And I think COVID really accelerated that. Yeah. I don't know why, but the world looked very different post-COVID.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. Go for it. It's good.
Yeah, exactly. Go for it.
And our last closing question is, because our podcast is called Many Different Birds, if you were to be a bird, what bird would you be and why?
Thunderbird. So my name that was given to me by, sometimes people talk about my colonial name or my income tax name is Sharon Goulet. But the name I've been given two names, and the name that I was given by Elder Patrick Daigneault is Yellow Thunderbird Woman. So my understanding of what he told me is thunderbirds tend to fly high, and and see the huge larger picture, which I think, well, that's policy work, right? Some of that stuff that I tend to be drawn to. So yeah, I think and you're given names to give you direction and chart a path for you. So yeah, I think I need to honor that name and stick with that name. So, yeah.
I think you have honored it.
Yeah, it's a really nice name. Thank you so much, Sharon, for coming today.
Yeah, no problem.
We want to thank CJSW, the Indigenous Global and Local Health Office, Grandmother's Lounge, and the You Create team for helping us kickstart and keep running this podcast. We couldn't have done this without your support and knowledge. And additionally, great news, we've actually created an Instagram for our podcast. So please follow us on Instagram at MDB90.9, and also keep a lookout for our LinkedIn pages and our brand new YouTube channel that's going to come out very soon.
And do let us know if you have any feedback, questions, or guests you would like to bring on this show, or if you yourself would want to be part of this show. We want to hear your voice. And lastly, thank you to everyone who tuned in. Remember to join us on CJSW, Spotify, and Apple Music for bi-weekly episodes on all topics of healthcare with special guests and your two favorite hosts, Nidhi and Harveen.
Thank you.